up, dude?
My brother?
Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing?
All right, pretty good, yeah.
Do you want to be the person that others are looking at and say you're delusional?
Yeah. Nobody got rewarded, or is recognized as being an innovator without having innovated or created something that didn't exist before, right? And so, yeah, you got to be a little crazy. Adrian, if you give me $1, I'm going to give you 2, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do that. It's very simple, actually. But it's trust, man. What's the substitute for trust? There's nothing, right? Clients listen to the sales reps they trust in this industry because,
Let's chat about sales, man.
Sure.
Chat about sales. With this enterprise sales, I had an experience recently, right? And we interview for enterprise sales, and I'm gonna be honest with you. People that came strongly recommended.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not I never done sales before working for myself, but I've been incredibly disappointed, right?
Right.
Again, not people that just came, applying or asking because they saw a poster online.
Right.
So what is that makes a great enterprise salesperson? So sales rep.
I mean, first and foremost, it's strategic mindset, right? You understand that, with enterprise, what you're looking to do is you're basically calling this person a whale hunter, right? Enterprise sales means that they're chasing large logos for the opportunities that they represent, right? And so, an enterprise sales rep isn't trying to make a sale, a singular deal. They're actually creating partnerships, right? And so, strategically, you have to be able to understand what it is you can do for an organization, not just the one you work for, but the one you're trying to sell into, right? Mm-hmm. So an enterprise sales rep, has a vision of 2 organizations coming together, not just exchanging money, but really, really, bridging the gap between 2 different companies, right? Where that differs from, let's say, a regional salesperson or a door-to-door salesperson is obviously the transaction, right? If I'm selling floors, that's a different selling cycle and different buying cycle than, creating software partnerships, right? And an enterprise sales rep needs to be able to kind of go in and say, this is what I offer, this is what you guys need as an organization, and understanding their business, right? Understanding how you fold into it, not just in let's say a marketing kind of way. I sell marketing technology, but I have to understand the implications to their operations, and everything like that. So and their data teams, enterprise salesperson really is going into an entire enterprise and understanding how the partnership creates a downstream or down funnel kind of ripple effect to the rest of the organization. If you can't see around the corners, you're not going to be a good enterprise sales rep.
How do you is that something, I'm guessing it's not something you're born with. How do you develop that? How do you build that muscle? What are some things that someone that does or even wants to do enterprise sales, you as a veteran, what are the pieces of advice? Where do you start? How do I become a great, maybe I want to do just tell me if I wanted to become a great enterprise salesperson. What would you advise me? Give me your playbook.
Well, that's an interesting question, right? Because I don't understand. It's interesting. I get, from my standpoint, the reason I wanted to become an enterprise sales rep was because of the revenue implications as a sales rep, right? You sell entire organizations, you're going after big wheels. That obviously comes with a little bit of money, right? For me, what do you have to have first? Obviously the ambition, right? To be able to sit there and say, hey, I want to be able to sit in these boardrooms and talk about partnerships that are, scaled, right? Ambition would be the first thing, right? Secondly, this is really interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about it in these terms, right? But you have to be able to do this over a long period of time, right? As a salesperson, your quick revenue opportunities are very appealing, right? Churn and burn, on to the next one. There's nothing wrong with that. I used to work in retail sales, and there's a part of me that misses that transactional relationship where you're just hey, bing, bang, boom, we're done here, right? The enterprise sales rep, has to be disciplined over a long period of time. They have to be committed to a vision, right? For their own vision and the organization's vision, their partner's vision. That is something that is realized over a very, very long period of time, a lot of times. How do you become one? What do you need? there's a lot of things that, are at play here, but, ultimately, I think the thing that I found most successful is I wanted to be part of disruptive, companies, organizations, things that are really making a difference and changing. And I think, you can't do this without some kind of bigger vision or grander idea of what you want to be doing. I think there's an idealism that has to come with.
Do you want to be the person that others are looking at and say you're delusional?
Yeah.
Is that the level of conviction that you have to have?
Yeah, right. If you think about, people that have, done really, really great things, almost inevitably they were all considered crazy or delusional at first, right? And so I think when you put it in those terms, it sounds kind of, maybe not, but yeah, I mean, right? That's the only way to even, I guess, understand if you're doing something. Nobody got rewarded, or is recognized as being an innovator without having innovated or created something that didn't exist before, right? And so, yeah, you got to be a little crazy.
Well, and I don't think playing it safe, has it's a kind of like the risk-reward situation. You're gonna play safe. You're gonna limit yourself to what you could achieve.
Yeah.
Right? Versus the person that's all in, dedicated, and they're willing to do whatever it takes, and also go against the grain of society or the industry or their peers. They're judging like, no, you shouldn't be doing this way.
Yeah.
I think that if you don't have that level of crazy and commitment to believe to see before everybody else sees it, right?
Yeah.
To have that vision and then work towards birthing it into reality, right? Into creating it as a reality.
Right.
I not just enterprise sales, but this is a big, this is a very big lift, right? Because like you said, you're selling to companies that are huge, 50,000, 100,000, 500,000 units, 1 million, Gray Star. It takes a whole lot to see a deal through the finish line.
Yeah.
So the question is how do you navigate within a company, right? Because enterprise sales, we had to say it here, is not just one decision maker. There's so many people on a buyer side that are involved.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate inside the company?
That's a great question, right? The interesting thing about our industry, I think the key thing that continues to make enterprise sales so interesting is that it does almost change from organization that you sell into, from organization to organization. But ultimately, understanding the motivators and the decision-making kind of logic at each organization. That's where you have to be able to kind of understand, if I buy marketing technology at $100, what's that do to my overall operations budget? What does that do to all the teams, right, within that organization? And then you have to basically understand or identify the stakeholders and create the what's in it for me kind of argument and big picture visibility. You're generally got a better view of how it impacts everybody, and you go from, let's say, suite to suite, getting the decision makers and understanding that you're basically creating the chain, right? The kinetic chain, right? You go to a company Gray Star, right? That has 1 million different decision makers and 1 million different suites, right? Understanding that you're gonna have to switch your hats too, and that you're gonna have to speak to the things that motivate them. That's what makes it so interesting, right? You have to sell, but you have to use different motivators and different, let's say, levels of understanding of their business in order to appeal to that particular buyer in that suite, right? In that office, it's an interesting model, man, for sure.
Do you keep a scoreboard of how much you sold lifetime in enterprise?
No, I get accused of the sales guy math all the time. So I don't run that. It's kind of silly. I count my success more in my network and who I'm friends with and who I've sold into more than the money, right? For me, when I look at my career, I basically, my scorecard is, the companies that I've worked with more than the money that was generated through them, and then even with that, some of my favorite people and some of my favorite clients, I don't think I've ever sold anything to. Some of them, you know what I mean? And so I always joke that, I haven't lost a deal ever. I'm still working on all of them. And so, to that end, when you talk about like what you're trying to do, my goals are obviously more monetary. But I don't do the big, I've sold $1 million. A lot of that stuff for me is just more like fluff. And, it's like, dude, I got a nice house. My kids are taken care of. They're beautiful. My wife's happy. That's the only scorecard I really keep. And then, if I'm talking to teams, my ability to say, I know somebody there, and I know somebody there, and I know somebody there, and that's ultimately what makes me the happiest, is saying I'm pretty well connected in this thing that I've chosen to do.
I want to push back there, man, and say like what you can measure, you can't really, how do you gauge?
Yeah.
Like I understand that, this is about happiness and everything, but like if you don't have like a KPI, a benchmark, to just say, 100,000 worth of sales is not like $10 million worth of sales.
Yeah.
There's a significant difference, and you're right, satisfaction is important. You gotta love what you do. You gotta get up in the morning being excited about selling whatever you're selling. Without that, it feels like a pain, like a chore, right? Like a burden. But then ultimately what it is, right? You gotta say, hey, how did I do? Well, it's not just about how you feel, about like what you produced.
No, well, so to that end, I think what you asked was if I have a lifetime scorecard, right?
I did, correct, I did.
And so, but from a month to month and a quarter to quarter, that's all I do is measure what we're doing, the output.
Cool.
So that's ultimately, I guess, to get to your question, right? Is do I look back and think about all the things that I've done? No, I look straight ahead, and to that end, I absolutely keep a scorecard. You know what I mean? That's how you manage it. But I have a lot of, let's say, just amnesia. I would say a lot of what I have done has almost no impact on what I'm about to do. You know what I mean? Other than that, it informs me, my strategy, and my, let's say, what I need to know. But if you sold, I'm very much used to the "what have you done for me lately" kind of sales existence, and so reflecting too much on like the whole number that I sold over my lifetime just is so I don't know, it doesn't make any sense, right? Nonsensical. Like it doesn't. I don't keep that tally, but I do manage my book pretty tight. And right now, like, I work for an organization that has some pretty lofty goals. So if I wasn't managing that real tight, we'd be in serious trouble. But we manage tight. Believe me when I say that. We absolutely measure KPIs, and we absolutely are measuring the output and everything like that.
Tell me about the craziest thing that you've done to close a deal.
The craziest thing I've done to close a deal, I don't think that I have anything crazy, right? But the things that I'm like most proud of is that I just stay. I'm a dog on a bone.
It could be a conversation, right? It could be a line that really got the person sold on. It doesn't have to be like I acted crazy, like something out of this world.
Of course. I think, if you ask me like the thing that I feel like where I showed determination, right, is I've been told no by certain companies and basically never stopped the sales call ever. You know what I mean? Like I circle back with people, I check in, we're going out to dinner, right? We're going hanging out, we're doing the things that clients and customers do in this industry. And they may have told me, respectfully, or some more than others, right, that there's no deal. And I stay with it. And I go, understand, no, of course, there's no deal, right? We get this. And 6 months later, we're signing a deal. You know what I mean? So you ask me the craziest thing, I don't really take no for an answer. I'm obviously not going to be like rude or overly persistent. But I mean, when I say that I've never lost a deal, man, I'm like, I really almost kind of believe it. You want to talk about my kind of craziness or delusion? I don't think anything's ever dead. Nothing's ever dead in this industry. And that's the crazy thing. You want a specific example? I want to try to give you what you're asking for here. I would just say, I'm a dog on a bone, man, and I don't stop.
Why are so many organizations missing the mark when it comes to sales? And why am I seeing, I guess, so much mediocrity when it comes to sales. And am I being wrong about saying this? That in majority, like when we're looking at Salesforce in an industry is, everybody just like super transactional, and they're starting with a feature, with a product, versus trying to do a discovery, understanding if that's even a fit, right?
Yeah. So I like this question, right? Because I'm going to tell you that if you talk about, let's say, I do believe the art of selling is dying a little bit. Just generationally, I think the ability to kind of interact is something that is becoming less and less common. You know what I mean? So I think probably my generation is the last of like your, let's say, traditional sales dog, pick up the phone, dial for dollars, and understand how to really connect with people, right? So that, I think that probably answers part of it, right? In that it is technology, as it gets better, requires, let's say, the interpersonal skills less. But I think deeper than that, what you are seeing in our industry, I'm talking about industry.
I really, this is the only industry that I really know.
Yeah, right. In our industry, I think that what you see is a lot of poor leadership. I think you see people that, let's say, particularly in like the startup segment, right? Those organizations a lot of time come into, let's say, multifamily with like more of a traditional tech background, and they go, oh man, multifamily doesn't get it, right? We're going to impose our will because they don't know any better, right? They're stupid. So first, it's like lack of respect for what is true to this industry, right? You get that from a CEO who's a founder. I know, right? I'm the smart one. I'm the better. So it's like, this whole idea that multifamily is 10 years behind, 15 years behind, and, they don't know tech. And it's like, no, they know tech, right? There's certain, let's say, institutions and certain things that keep us from being able to move at the same clip, let's say, as other e-commerce verticals. But the biggest question is, why don't we sell better? And I think that gets right to the fact that we don't respect the vendors most recently, just don't have the same or the level of respect for their client. They think that they don't know. Oh, if they just knew, you know what I mean? And they think that they can impose their own vocabulary on people. These are the words I use. This is what you should be doing. And it's not enough of that. It's just listening to our clients, right? I think the biggest perpetrators of bad selling in our industry are the organizations that are run by your CEO founder, right? That's my hot take, right? That's the thing is, I work luckily for an organization that isn't guilty of that, but even to some degree, it's like you have to speak your customer's language. Why are we so bad at selling, Adrian? Because we don't always speak our customer's language. We think that we're more clever or smarter than our clients sometimes, and that's the thing that drives me nuts, right, as a sales rep. And I worked at organizations that didn't respect their clients enough to listen to them.
I love this. I love where it's going, and I couldn't agree more, right? When you're trying to create like new language and think that this is what we believe in and we're gonna do whatever it takes for the client to adopt, you also had to understand like what it takes to create that,
right?
Because there's only one Apple, there's only one Uber, there's only one of each, right? Those are a category of one products or services, and then imagine how long did it take them to become that brand, acknowledged that way, to be acknowledged that way and respected. Nike spends tens of billions of dollars a year in marketing, right?
Yeah.
When they crafted their message, do you have the juice that these companies have? Because that's what it takes in order for you to create new language and make people buy something they didn't even know that they needed, like the Apple phone, the iPhone.
Yeah.
If you have that type of resource, that's great. But again, I don't see like many products or services, period, not just in multifamily, they're going to fit in that category. Those are specific categories of one. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, so what you just brought up was really interesting, right? Apple, Nike, right? The trendsetters or the flavor setters of like our culture, right? But if you think about their origins, they gained people's trust first with, let's say, products and things that the people understood. Like they met the consumer where they were at, right? And it was once they established trust that they started to invent things and bring things to market. I think the evolution of all of that is built on the fact that you got somebody what they needed first. You know what I mean? I think the only, if you think about like, you know, Henry Ford invents a new car, right? I mean, that's something that is almost a no-brainer, right? The value is built in
for us today, but you know, back in the day,
but back then,
I think people wanted a faster horse. He said that, so
that's right. You know, the idea that we can change the way people do things, you know, the invention has to be so amazing and so great that we're you know, in a position to have their trust, right? If the invention isn't that good and you're building let's say the better mousetrap, you know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, I just think that, you know, to be really disruptive, you know, there has to be either the product has to be so good that it's undeniable, or your language is so easy, approachable, and, you know, that you just speak directly to people that you can get that. But it's one or the other or both, right? But, you know, in our industry, like if we relate it back to our industry, the people that come in and think they're going to change the way that our clients do business do that with almost no cachet, right? They do that with almost no trust, no cachet, and then don't understand why, you know, their go-to-market, you know, that's ultimately, I think, why startups fail in our industry, is that they don't relate enough. You know, I think the greatest thing about our industry is also probably the thing that holds us back more than anything, is how heavy of a relationship it is. But it's trust, man. What's the substitute for trust? There's nothing, right? Like, I mean, clients listen to the sales reps they trust in this industry because, you know, they know, you know, they live in the same communities, or they see each other every year. They've been doing business. There's this established thing, you know, and there's never going to be a substitute for trust, you know, unless the product is just so damn good that it's undeniable.
How do you create a great offer, man? Like when you're selling, how do you build a great offer? Like an offer that I'm calling that the offer that you can't refuse. You know, that's my mantra.
Yeah.
We're making an offer that you can't refuse. How do you create it?
Well, you know, I think when you look at what this industry is, right, and it's just these numbers games, right? The easiest way to do that is to sit there and say, Adrian, if you give me $1, I'm going to give you $2, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do that. It's very simple, actually, and that's how you make the deal, right? And say, I can justify my existence. You know what I mean? I've either got the data to support what I'm doing, you know what I mean, or you know, you'll feel the impact on your NOI, you know what I mean? That's how you make the deal, right? You have really great companies that have come in here and that can clearly define or show exactly what they're doing for you. That's how you know, and then those are the deal makers, right? I say, you give me $1, I'll give you $2. Right? Or you give me $5 and I'll give you 10, right? That's ultimately how all these deals are made, right? But, you know, there's a lot of fluff in software. That's all I can really speak to. And so a lot of times, you know, people get into, you know, accumulating data for its own sake and start drawing these very convoluted squiggly lines and wraparounds to get to the value. And, you know, you can be as good a BSer as you possibly could be, but selling that way becomes very, very hard. You know, making deals when you don't have a straight line to the benefit is the hardest thing to do.
So we're living in a tight environment, and everybody's watching spending and all. How can someone sell in this challenging environment to where, you know, everybody's looking and like acknowledging there's a lot of pain, right? That companies don't sell nearly as much as they used to 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. I think what's true about right now, and it's true about whatever the economic, you know, situation is that people, you know, want value, you know, and your ability to articulate the value of a partnership is what people are looking for. Now, you know, obviously budgets are tight, but they're always kind of tight. I mean, people always want to make money. People always want margins, right? But your ability to communicate value is going to be it. I think Lee Iacocca, great car designer, had a really, really good quote, and he says, you know, people love value and they'll pay anything for it. That's true now, and that's true no matter what the economic climate is. You know, it's like you either make people feel good about what they're doing. You know, a client should feel like they got one over on you, whether they did or they didn't. You know.
You speak like a true salesman. I love it. I want to go a lot deeper, and I'll see you around, bro.
All right, bro. We'll connect when you get back to Atlanta.
Yeah.
When we get back to Atlanta. All right, homie. We'll see you.
Yeah. All right. Take care, bro.
Later, bro.